Okay, so let's unpack this. Um, when you bring your dog or cat into the exam room, you are essentially asking the veterinarian to solve a highly complex biological puzzle.
Right, it's a huge challenge.
But here is the catch you are handing them that puzzle with, like half the pieces missing.
Yeah, exactly.
And today we're doing a deep dive into a transcript from the Dog Health Academy, and it suggests that artificial intelligence is finally giving us a way to find those missing pieces.
Which is super exciting, but
But we need to separate the absolute hype from the reality here, because the truth is AI is not playing doctor. It's functioning more like an ultra observant, tireless medical scribe.
I love that comparison.
Thanks. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly what the scribe can do for you and your pets, and crucially, what it absolutely cannot do. We want to give you the ultimate shortcut to being a tech-empowered, fully well-informed pet parent.
And grounding our expectations is really the most important thing we can do right at the start.
Right. So what are we actually dealing with when we say AI?
Well, if we look at the underlying mechanics of how these systems operate, AI specifically, the large language models we interact with on our phones, is fundamentally just software.
Okay.
It is a predictive engine trained on massive, almost incomprehensible data sets. Its primary function is to recognize and generate patterns based on statistical probabilities.
So it's like incredibly good at math, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It processes information beautifully, but it is not a sentient brain. It possesses no actual comprehension of the physical world.
Which is a huge distinction to make.
It really is. Understanding that divide between, statistical text generation and actual biological comprehension is the key to using this technology without putting your pet at risk.
That sets the stage perfectly. So let's look at what this scribe is actually good at, because managing a pet's health is, it's fundamentally a chronic data management problem.
Oh, absolutely.
You, as the owner, you're juggling a job, a family, a household, trying to mentally track every minor fluctuation in your pet's diet or energy levels or bathroom habits over 10 or 15 years. That's a Herculean task.
Human memory is incredibly fallible, especially when we're stressed out or just really busy.
Yeah, totally.
The source material actually shares a highly relatable case study about a woman named Claire to illustrate this exact bottleneck.
Oh, right, Claire with the two dogs.
Yeah. She has a 7-year-old beagle and a 3-year-old mixed breed. She is a dedicated owner, works full-time, but she constantly felt overwhelmed by their preventative care schedules and, the subtle changes in their behavior.
Which, honestly, we have all been Claire.
Oh, 100%.
You get called into the vet's office, you sit down on that uncomfortable bench, and the vet asks a completely standard question like, when did the coughing actually start? Or, did you give the heartworm pill on the first of the month, or was it a few days late?
And your mind just goes totally blank.
Totally blank. You might know your beagle has been eating a little less lately, or seems a bit lethargic, but pinning down the exact Tuesday that shift occurred is nearly impossible when you are just, living your life.
And veterinarians see the fallout of that mental blankness every single day. They're trained diagnosticians, but they are completely reliant on the timeline the owner provides.
Right, garbage in, garbage out sort of thing.
Exactly. If the timeline is blurry, the diagnostic process takes longer. And it isn't a failure on the owner's part, it's just the reality of observing a nonverbal animal over a long period.
So to solve this, Claire integrated an AI-powered pet health app into her routine.
And she fundamentally changed the dynamic of her veterinary visits. Instead of relying on hindsight, she started logging data in real time.
Like tracking the exact dates of preventatives, logging the specific mornings the beagle didn't finish its breakfast, recording weight variations.
Right, so when she walks into the clinic now, she isn't guessing. She hands the vet a cohesive, chronological timeline.
And the clinical value of that cannot be overstated. A clear timeline lets a vet isolate variables so much faster.
Yes, but the AI element introduces something far more powerful than just a digital diary. It introduces active pattern recognition.
Okay, active pattern recognition, how does that play out?
Well, human brains are not naturally wired to spot subtle, long-term statistical correlations. For example, you might diligently log every time your dog has a loose stool, and you also log their daily treats.
Okay.
Over a 6-month period, you are incredibly unlikely to notice that the gastrointestinal upset only occurs on the specific days you offer a particular brand of rawhide.
Because when your dog is sick on the rug, you aren't running statistical regressions in your head. You're just like trying to find the carpet cleaner.
Precisely. You are reacting to the immediate crisis. Or consider a cat whose daily caloric intake dips slightly every single year in November.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. But as a human, a 12-month gap between events is an eternity. We brush it off as a random
No,
fluctuation.
because we just forget.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The AI, however, plots those inputs as data points on a continuous graph. It scans the entire horizon of your pet's life
Hmm.
and highlights the anomalies, pointing out that seasonal correlation. It takes invisible long-term trends and pulls them into focus.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
If we are ultimately just talking about inputting dates and symptoms into a phone interface, is this actually artificial intelligence? Because it sounds like I could just build a really detailed spreadsheet to track my dog's meals and bowel movements. What elevates this beyond like a glorified Excel document?
That's a great question. Well, a spreadsheet is entirely passive. It acts as a static repository for your data.
Right.
You still have to perform the manual labor of scanning the rows, cross-referencing the columns, and actively searching for the connections yourself.
Which nobody has the time or energy to do.
Exactly. What makes the modern tools AI is the analytical layer actively processing the inputs. The software uses algorithms to constantly compare your pet's specific data vector against massive data sets of typical canine or feline health timelines.
Oh, okay. So it's actively comparing.
Right. It isn't just storing the fact that your dog threw up.
Yeah.
It is actively evaluating that event against the dog's age, breed, and recent diet changes, and then proactively flagging the correlation for you.
That makes a ton of sense. It's the difference between buying a filing cabinet and hiring an assistant who reads every file and hands you an executive summary of the most critical trends.
This is the perfect way to look at it.
Okay, so the active processing makes sense. Once the app flags that your cat's appetite dips every November, you aren't just going to stare at that data point. Your immediate reaction is going to be asking the app, why is this happening?
Exactly.
And that fundamentally shifts the software from a passive diary into an active sounding board. You start exploring the information.
And this introduces the educational layer of the technology. Because large language models are trained on vast corpuses of text, they possess an incredible capacity to synthesize general health information and deliver it in plain, accessible language.
So if your app flags that your older dog has started limping after morning walks, you can query the system about the potential causes of that specific symptom.
Right. And it won't just hit you with a generic, please consult your veterinarian. It actually provides a landscape of possibilities.
Like it might explain that a limp in a senior dog could be osteoarthritis, or it could be a soft tissue injury like a cranial cruciate ligament tear, or even something as simple as a thorn embedded in the paw pad.
Exactly. It outlines the parameters of the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychological shift this creates for you as an owner is profound.
How so?
Because the objective is not to extract a diagnosis from the machine. The objective is to arm yourself with a better medical vocabulary.
Oh, I see.
When you understand the broader landscape of what might be occurring physiologically, you're equipped to observe your pet with much greater acuity. You stop saying, my dog's leg hurts, and you start noticing, my dog is struggling to bear weight on the hind left leg, specifically after resting.
Right. And that level of detail drastically improves the questions you ask your vet. It's like using a language app for a few weeks before you travel to a foreign country.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
You play around on your phone, you learn some phrases and syntax, you are under no illusion that you're becoming a fluent local, right? You certainly aren't going to be writing poetry in that language.
Definitely not.
But you are acquiring the necessary vocabulary so that when you arrive in the city and need to find the train station, you can actually communicate with the locals effectively. The AI gives you the vocabulary so you can communicate with your veterinarian.
That analogy captures the utility perfectly. You're learning to translate your pet's physical behaviors into a structured medical context, which empowers the actual expert, the local, in your analogy, to assist you much faster.
But hold on, here is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
If this system has ingested thousands of veterinary textbooks, scraped every published medical journal, and processed millions of case studies, isn't its database objectively vastly superior to the brain of my local vet?
Well,
Why isn't that aggregation of data enough? If it knows every single cause of a limp, why can't it just be the doctor?
what's fascinating here is that this is where we run into the absolute hard limitations of the technology. What you are describing is the difference between possessing textual information and possessing clinical wisdom.
Okay, define clinical wisdom for me.
Well, AI cannot diagnose a patient because a diagnosis is fundamentally anchored in the physical, real-world presentation of the animal. Think about the sensory inputs a veterinarian relies on during an exam.
Right, they're using all their senses, not just reading a chart.
Exactly. When a vet runs their hands over a dog's abdomen, they are feeling for subtle abnormalities in tissue density. They are assessing muscle atrophy that might indicate a compensatory injury.
They're using a stethoscope to listen to the specific cadence and murmur grades of a heartbeat.
Yes, they can smell the uremic odor on a cat's breath that indicates advanced kidney disease. They observe how a dog fractionally shifts its weight to avoid pressure on a specific joint.
Wow.
The AI is entirely locked out of that physical reality. It relies entirely on the binary, flattened text input you provide. It only knows Doug is limping. It cannot see the compensatory shift.
That is a massive blind spot. And because it lacks that physical context, it also can't reliably interpret things like lab results, right? The sources made it very clear that reading a blood panel is not just matching numbers to a chart.
Interpreting diagnostics requires immense contextual framing. An AI might read a high white blood cell count and generate a panic-inducing list of severe infections.
Which would terrify an owner.
Right. But a human veterinarian looks at that exact same number and factors in the dog's extreme anxiety in the clinic, knowing that stress alone can cause a temporary spike in those specific markers. The AI lacks the holistic picture of the individual animal.
Which means it absolutely cannot prescribe treatments or medications. Like, if you are using a pet health interface and it attempts to calculate a specific milligram dosage of a painkiller for your dog based on their weight, you need to delete that app immediately.
It is a critical safety hazard. Responsible AI developers hard-code their platforms to refuse dosage recommendations entirely.
Good.
And it goes without saying, but this technology has absolutely zero utility in an emergency scenario. If your animal has been struck by a vehicle, is experiencing respiratory distress, or has ingested a known toxin, attempting to consult an algorithm is a dangerous waste of time.
Right, you proceed directly to an emergency clinic.
Exactly.
Because the delay caused by seeking a second opinion from a chatbot could literally be the difference between life and death. But that danger, that false sense of security where an owner thinks, well, the computer read a million books and it says this coughing is probably just allergies, that leads us right into the biggest traps we fall into with this tech.
It really does.
We assume because the app spits out a beautiful, grammatically perfect paragraph, it must be factually correct.
That is perhaps the most pervasive trap. In the tech industry, it is known as a hallucination. We have to remember how large language models actually generate their responses.
Right. They're not just pulling from a secure database.
No, they are not querying a verified database of facts like a search engine. They are predicting the next most likely word in a sequence based on the statistical weights of their training data.
That's wild to think about.
Because they're designed to sound authoritative and fluent, they can generate an answer that is completely fabricated, inventing a non-existent treatment protocol or citing a fake veterinary study and deliver it with absolute confidence.
They can be confidently wrong?
Yes.
It's basically an autocomplete feature on steroids. It's prioritizing sounding good over being right. And it's so easy to forget that limitation because the chat interfaces are designed to be so incredibly friendly and conversational.
Oh, yeah.
It talks to you like a highly attentive friend who remembers your dog's name, which creates this bizarre, false intimacy.
The interface heavily anthropomorphizes the software. It uses empathetic language, saying things like, "I'm so sorry to hear Buster isn't feeling well today."
But it has no connection to Buster.
None. It processes the text strings you type into the prompt box, nothing more. It doesn't know that Buster is an incredibly stoic working dog who never cries, meaning the fact that he whimpered once when standing up is actually a massive red flag.
Yes. It's exactly like someone reading a dating profile.
Well, that's a great analogy.
Right. The algorithm knows the raw stats you typed in. Yeah. It knows the breed is a golden retriever. It knows the dog is 4 years old, and it knows the weight. It reads the equivalent of love's long walks on the beach.
But it doesn't actually know who they are in the room.
Exactly. It doesn't know that your specific golden retriever is terrified of getting its paws wet and will aggressively refuse to walk if the pavement is even slightly damp. It only knows the generic metrics, not the soul and personality of the animal in front of you.
That perfectly illustrates the boundary. The AI understands the aggregate data of the breed, not the unique idiosyncrasies of the individual.
So true.
And relying too heavily on the aggregate data leads to another major misconception. There's a stigma that using AI to manage pet health is essentially a shortcut for lazy owners who want to avoid paying for a veterinary consultation.
But the reality is the exact opposite.
Completely.
If you actually want this technology to provide useful pattern recognition, you have to be meticulously thorough. You have to log the diet changes, the weather, the exercise duration, and the symptom fluctuations consistently.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. It doesn't enable laziness. It practically forces you to become a hyper-observant researcher in your own home.
The utility of the tool scales directly with the effort the owner invests. So, knowing these strict boundaries, knowing that it hallucinates, that it lacks clinical wisdom, and that it requires meticulous input, how do we construct a practical blueprint for integrating this into daily life?
Like, how do we actually use it responsibly?
Yes.
Well, the first pillar of that blueprint is offloading the administrative burden. Let the software do the remembering for you. We talked about logging symptoms, but the sources emphasize using these platforms for rigid preventative care reminders.
Which is huge.
Yeah, you set up recurring alerts for monthly heartworm preventions, quarterly tick treatments, and annual vaccinations. If you have a senior cat, you program reminders for their 6-month renal blood work panel.
Right. By offloading that sheer mental friction to the application, you free up your own cognitive space to simply enjoy the relationship with your pet.
Automating the logistics is highly effective.
Mm.
And then the second pillar involves the actual mechanics of how you communicate with the AI. Prompt engineering is a crucial skill here.
It really is. Because if you type the phrase, "What is wrong with my dog?" you are explicitly asking the software for a diagnosis.
Which we know it can't give.
Exactly. Because of how the neural pathways of the model work, that phrasing might trigger a restrictive safety filter, giving you a useless non-answer, or worse, it might attempt to guess the diagnosis based on limited text.
So you have to change the framing to trigger an educational response. You don't ask for a verdict, you ask for a landscape.
Precisely. You should formulate prompts like, what are the common physiological causes of lethargy in a 7-year-old beagle?
Oh, that's much better.
By explicitly asking for common causes, you direct the model to retrieve that broad educational landscape. You're actively gathering contextual notes to bring to your vet rather than demanding a final answer from a machine.
The sources specifically highlight a platform called VitalPet that navigates this balance effectively. It was praised because it centralizes the medical records, automates the reminders, and incorporates the AI education, but it is explicitly designed to stay in its lane.
Which is so important. Software that respects its own limitations is incredibly valuable.
Definitely.
But the final, and unequivocally the most important, pillar of this blueprint supersedes the technology entirely.
And what's that?
It is the preservation of your owner intuition. You spend every single day observing the micro expressions, the routines, and the energy levels of your animal.
You know them best.
Exactly. If your AI application evaluates a symptom and suggests it is likely benign, but your deeply ingrained intuition tells you that something is fundamentally wrong with your pet, you ignore the screen and you call your veterinarian.
Period. So when we strip away the sci-fi expectations and look at the practical reality, what does this all mean for the everyday pet parent? Like, how do you ensure you aren't accidentally outsourcing your own pet parent intuition to an algorithm?
You protect your intuition by firmly establishing the roles in your pet's healthcare team.
Okay, break that down for us.
The AI's role is to provide structural organization and broad educational context. The veterinarian's role is to provide physical diagnosis, clinical wisdom, and medical treatment.
Right.
And your role is to provide the deep, bonded observation and the love. The technology is a phenomenal support structure. When you walk into a clinic with a meticulously organized, digitally tracked timeline of your animal's health, you are dramatically accelerating the veterinarian's ability to help.
But the software will never replace the trained medical professionals.
No, and it will certainly never replace the nonverbal bond you share with your animal.
I love the clarity of those boundaries. Utilizing these digital tools doesn't make you a detached or lazy owner. It makes you a highly prepared, proactive partner in your dog or cat's health journey. You are systematically removing the friction from the logistics of their care, which ultimately allows you to be much more present for the animal itself.
That is the ultimate goal of any good technology. But before we conclude, there is a fascinating concept hinted at in the source material regarding the future of digital care that I really want you to consider.
Oh, tell me.
Everything we have discussed today relies on manual human input. The AI only knows what we physically type into the interface. We are the bottleneck for the data.
Right. The system is only as observant as we are.
But look at the rapid advancements in digital diagnostics and wearable technology. What happens in the very near future when these AI models bypass our manual input and connect directly to a smart collar on your dog?
Wait. Oh, wow.
Imagine an algorithm that is continuously monitoring your dog's resting heart rate, analyzing their respiratory cadence while they sleep, and tracking fractional shifts in their core body temperature 24 hours a day.
That entirely removes the human bottleneck.
It does. If that system can detect a subtle heart murmur or flag a microscopic temperature spike days before the dog ever exhibits a visible symptom like lethargy or a cough, how does that alter the fundamental nature of our relationship with our pets?
That's a profound question.
We transition from reacting to visible sickness to relying on a silent guardian that predicts illness before it manifests.
That is incredible, but it also sounds slightly terrifying.
Just a bit.
It takes the burden of observation off our shoulders, but I can easily see how having a constant stream of your dog's biometric data pinging your phone could lead to massive data overload and owner anxiety.
Very true.
It changes the dynamic from living with a pet to constantly monitoring a patient. We will definitely have to tackle the implications of those biometrics when smart collars become the standard. But for today, as you go back to your routine, take a look at your dog or your cat. And remember, AI is an incredibly powerful, ultra-organized scribe for their health journey. But it isn't doctor, and it will never be a replacement for you.